Very good morning to everyone on the last day of CIFFI 2021. I, Mohammed Kamil, Assistant Professor, DME Media School, welcome you all to the third edition of Cineasta International Film Festival, CIFFI 2021. CIFFI is the world's first 7-day hybrid film festival organized by the two educational institute of two countries, that is DME Media School of Delhi Metropolitan Education, Delhi NCR, India, in association with School of Communication and Creative Arts, Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia. The theme of CIFFI 2021 is Cinematic Rejuvenation, Cinema 2021. CIFFI is being organized in hybrid mode to serve as a platform for beholding the news methods of viewing and studying the cinema during the challenging time of pandemic. The first edition of CIFFI was held in April 2019, followed by the second edition of CIFFI that was held in the month of December 2020. It is our privilege to be associated with the Deakin University during the two previous editions of our film festival. It is a proud moment for me to mention that CIFFI 2021 has received the submission of 3,130 films from 111 countries. CIFFI 2021 brings 21 sessions with 70 experts through 12 panel discussions, 1 curated session, 2 master classes, 2 workshops, 2 special sessions, and 2 special segments. Mr. Tigmanshu Dhulia, a National Award film-winning director from Bollywood, is the festival ambassador for CIFFI 2021. We are extremely thankful for his constant support. The festival partners for CIFFI 2021 are Cover Drive Production, Vigyan Prasar, the organizer of National Science Film Festival of India, International Science Film Festival of India, and India International Science Film Festival, CMS Vatavaran, Environment and Wildlife Film Festival and Forum, Kids Cinema 2020, an online international children's film festival, Culture Cinema, a concept-based film festival aimed at celebrating world culture, We Care, Film Festival for promoting and exhibiting film festival on disability, Delhi International Film Festival for screening films amid heightened deliberations and world cinema. Our partner from Australia are Asian Media and Culture Studies Network, Australian Indian Film Practitioners and Research Networks. Institutional partners involve Global Media Education Council, Indian Documentary Producers Associations, and Indian Academy of Shorts. Our media partner are APN News, a fast-paced current affairs web channel, and the Policy Times, an international platform for unfolding policy and governance issues. CIFFI 2021 is powered by SPARK, the Student Council of DME Media School. Journalism @DME is the official newsletter of DME Media School. The fortnightly publication covers all the major activities happening in and out the campus. It is the student-centric newsletter that carried out entirely by the students under the supervision of faculty members. DME TV is the official YouTube channel of DME, where you can find the playlist related to all the sessions, lecture series, film festivals, and the conference. It gives me immense pleasure to announce that for the various sessions, we are live on our official Facebook page of DME. For more information, follow us on the social media handles. Links are given in the chat box. Today, we will be screening 45 films in the session. You can watch all the films being screened on the website, that is ciffi.dme.ac.in. Well, this masterclass is about one of the greatest Indian filmmakers, that is Shyam Benegal, and the topic of the masterclass is Shyam Benegal, the Master Storyteller. Now, I request Professor Dr. Amrish Saxena, Festival Director and Dean DME Media School, to kindly give the opening remark.
Thank you, Kamil. So it's a matter of pleasure that we have entered finally the final day of the third edition of CIFFI. From last year, we experimented this hybrid mode and we converted the 4-day festival to the 7-day festival for the simple reason because in the online mode or the hybrid mode, you cannot have more than 1 sessions at one time. So this time, initially we were thinking of having it in the physical mode, but then ultimately we have to go in the hybrid mode. But this time we have experimented so much in the hybrid, like we have created 2 platforms on the digital space. On one platform, there's a continuous screening of the films, the shortlisted films out of more than 3,000 films that we received this time. So 400 plus films are being screened during this 4 days time. Besides that, on the other platform, we have created all these panel discussions, master classes, workshops, curate sessions, and all. And every day there are 3 sessions happening. So that way, this is the 19th session wherein we are meeting and deliberating or discussing, or some presentation is being made on some pertinent topic related to cinema. So that is all. And in today, I must tell you about that also, that we are having the validity session at 2:30 to 4:30, wherein the guest will be joining from Australia and other parts of the world. Also, the prize winners, because the films were in the competitive categories, and there were 7 categories. So there are 20 plus award winners from different countries of the world. They will also be joining in the valedictory session. Immediately after this session, there is another session which is being brought to us by Deakin University, Australia. And so that is all about this. One important thing I must tell you, since we were completing this Dilip Kumar was completing 100 years next year, and this year we lost him. So we also decided to have a special session on Dilip Kumar, which has already happened 2 days ago. And then with the help of Dr. Vivek Sajdev, we have brought this session to our audience, which is on Shyam Benegal, because Shyam Benegal is considered the tallest filmmaker of the contemporary time. So we thought that if this kind of session can also be brought to all budding filmmakers and the film enthusiasts and the students, so obviously it will add value to whatever we have been doing as part of CIFFI 2021. So I'll stop here, and I'm looking forward to have very engaging session coming forward. Thank you.
Now I invite Muskan Baweja to kindly introduce the guest of the session.
Let me take a moment here to introduce the expert of the session, Dr. Vivek Sajdev. Dr. Sachdeva is a professor of English at GGSIP University, New Delhi, with over 20 years of teaching experience. His area of specialization is film studies, focusing on the adaptation of Ruth Praveer Jabalwala's novel into films. Sir has also authored a book on Shyam Benegal. Recently, Sir has translated Punjabi partition plays into English, which has been anthologized in Play from a Fractured Land. Currently, Sir is working on the representation of the partition in Punjabi drama and also in films made in India and Pakistan. Sir is a visiting professor at Birmingham Institute of Media and English, Birmingham City University, UK. Now, I request Sir to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you, Muskan. Thank you, Amreshji, and thank you, Professor Bala. First of all, I congratulate you for having taken this initiative. I'm really happy to know that you have been continuing with organizing film festivals. And despite the pandemic challenge, you are not willing to surrender to the challenge given to us by this COVID-19 pandemic situation. Congratulations to you all, and congratulations to your co-organizers in this initiative. Well, as Amrishi said, that Shyam Benegal is perhaps one of the tallest filmmakers of India. And I must say that he was not exaggerating when he said that Shyam Benegal is one of the tallest filmmakers. He is certainly one of those filmmakers who have given a recognition to Indian cinema outside India. We all know that how Raj Kapoor films were very popular in Russia. Satyajit Ray is one name which has given, we can say, recognition to Indian cinema all over the world. And Shyam Benegal is no less. Recently, I was chatting to someone on Facebook, and person was from Russia. She is a professor of history there. And the first thing she told me that they love Shyam Benegal there in Russia as well. So he is certainly one of those filmmakers who have transcended the borders of India. It's interesting that Shyam Benegal was not born in a Hindi-speaking family. He was born in Hyderabad. If we go into the roots of his family, then that family belongs to one part of Karnataka. Instead of making films in the regional language, he decided to make films in Hindi. And that was perhaps his first step to transcend his immediate boundaries, the boundaries given to us by our language. And then we know that he has also made a film like The Making of the Mahatma in English as well. He has been, I can say, transcending the boundaries generally given to us all by our language, by our culture. He is a filmmaker, and his language is the language of visuals. It is through the language of visuals that he tells his stories. Yes, in Indian context, it became very important when sound was added to films. Because the moment sound was added to films and films began to talk, which language characters would talk became a question. And then we have all these categories: so Hindi cinema, Bengali cinema, Telugu cinema, Punjabi cinema, Tamil cinema. But despite these verbal languages, the primary language of cinema is visuals. And Shyam Benegal is one filmmaker who we can say has mastered the art of telling stories through visuals. Because every good filmmaker is one who knows how to write a film with camera, and he knows how to write with camera. I'm nobody. I cannot, in a way, I'm too ordinary a person to praise Shyam Benegal's art. He is certainly a master storyteller. But whether it is filmmaking or whether it is any other art form, be it novel writing, be it painting, craft is one part of it. Mastering the craft does not make any artist a great artist. Along with the craft, what comes is what you want to tell to your audience, the content of your stories. And that is where Shyam Benegal, I must say, that he is head and shoulders above the rest. He cannot be placed among the crowd of filmmakers. He is certainly distinct from others. Another thing that goes to his credit is that he has such a long and productive career. One of the most prolific filmmakers in India. His first feature film was made in 1974, Ankur. And before that, he was making short films, he was making ad films. Since 1974 till today, he is busy, active. And he has been constantly making films. And if you just just give a glance to the number of films he has made and the kind of films he has made, you will find that he is responding to what was happening in our post-independence India or in his contemporary India. The frame of his works is very wide. He begins his career with Ankur, which resonates with the peasants' revolt in Andhra, which took place immediately after India's independence. It started little before that, then those peasants' revolt continued after India's independence. Historically, we can say that starting his career with that time frame, he has also made films like Welcome to Sajjanpur and Valdenappa. It's this vast canvas that he has given to us. And in this career, he has not only made feature films, he has made documentary films, he has also made programs for TV. We know Discovery of India, everybody knows, Katha Sagar, and very recently his TV program on the Constitution of India, Samvidhan. He is an important name to reckon with, we can say, in the visual culture of India. Be it documentaries, be it his ad films, be it feature films, or his TV programs. He is there everywhere. And he is known not merely for the flamboyant use of camera or his control over craftsmanship, but the kind of films he has made. That makes him a very important filmmaker. Because as Muskan was saying, that if you learn something from listening to my talk on Shyam Benegal, important thing is that what makes a filmmaker a good filmmaker. So Shyam Benegal that way teaches us a lot. It's very difficult to define or put Shyam Benegal in one category, because he has made films like Ankur, he has made films like Nishant, Manthan, then he has also made films like Charandas Chor, then he has also made films like Sardari Begum, Zubeda, and he has also made films like The Making of the Mahatma of Subhash Chandra Bose, and then comedies like Welcome to Sajjanpur and Veldanaba. He is not known for one particular style of filmmaking. He has constantly been experimenting with his modes of storytelling. He has constantly been evolving as a storyteller. And he has experimented with different narrative strategies in his films without compromising on the basic issue. If we look at the wide range of films, if it is difficult to put him in a category, if it is difficult to define him, then looking at his commitment to the issues he has made films on, I think it is very easy to define him, that he is one filmmaker who is giving us an alternative image of India. His cinematic image does not give us what we call the popular or the mainstream image, both in the cinematic image as well as the image of India. If we talk about his early films, Shyam Benegal at that time was a name associated with Indian New Wave. And which films that established him were Ankur, Nishant, Manthan, and Bhumika. All these films were made from 1974 to 1977. 1994 is Ankur, 95 is Nishant, 96 is Manthan, and then 97 is, 77. 74, 75, 76, and 77 is Bhumika. These four films not merely established him as an important name of Indian New Wave, but also gave him critical acclaim and accolades as well. Now, in all these films, you will find that there is a conflict between feudal values that were continuing in post-independence India, and at the same time, there was the advent of modernity. So he's talking about social change. He wants to use, we can say, media, films as his medium for social change, but he is talking about social change in a very nuanced manner. Ankur is one film which is everybody praises, especially the last shot in which a boy picks up a stone and throws at the window of the feudal lord. And after that, there is, the entire frame is red. Shyam Benegal is suggesting uprising. The film is about exploitation of oppression of low caste men and women, especially women in a feudal society, set in a village. And the film ends on the note of we can say, of a rebellion. and a young boy is picking up a stone, throwing at the window of the feudal lord's house, followed by entire frame red. The screen is red. This arrangement gives us the whole message, what Shyam Benegal is trying to suggest us. Without showing a single visual of uprising, without showing a single shot of violence, he has conveyed the message. And that's where sometimes Garam Hawa also becomes very important film. I'm immediately reminded of Garam Hawa. You talk about partition and its problem without showing the visuals of violence. And that is one fundamental question. How art or an artist deals with these problems. It's not necessary always, it's not necessary to show visuals, though films is a medium of showing, but what you show and how you show it, it becomes very important. Nishant, on the other hand, is a film which shows us visuals of uprising. Mass mobilization is happening. The school teacher whose wife has been abducted by feudal lords, who is being gang raped by them. That helpless school teacher approaches everyone in the system. Nobody comes to his help. He mobilizes the people, getting inspiration from the priest of the village. And mass mobilization, when they attack the house of the feudal lord, they do not make any distinction between perpetrators of injustice and the victims of injustice, because somewhere they're also targeting the wife of the school teacher who was abducted by them, and innocent wife of the youngest brother as well. Maybe Shyam Benegal is suggesting that how if violence goes unbridled, it fails to make distinction between the right and the wrong. Third film, Manthan, again talks about social change, but this change, Shyam Benegal is talking about following or working within the democratic frame. It's about the White Revolution of Gujarat, the milk cooperative. We all know the milk cooperative, the product we all use here in Delhi as well. And that film was produced by the farmers. Each farmer contributed 2 rupees in order to generate funding for the filmmaking. And the film deals with the story of the low caste farmers. But in this film, change is taking place not through the use of violence or an overt uprising, but 2 important modes of empowerment have been used. One is economic empowerment by making a cooperative of dairy. Second is political empowerment by making the poor farmers participate in the democratic process. Now, somewhere all these issues, they were important in the 1970s. Let's not forget the time period in which Shyam Benegal is making these films is also the period of emergency. And before emergency, Black Panther movement had also picked momentum in India. So there was Dalit movement gaining momentum in India. And these films, which are talking about the empowerment or resistance and struggle shown by the low caste peasant community, either set in the villages of Andhra or in Gujarat, Shyam Benegal is giving us the narratives of those who are on the margins of the society. And that is where his films, they stand. As I said earlier, he's a different filmmaker. He gives us a different image of India. His villages are not like those romanticized, idealized, idyllic villages where farmers are very happy, singing songs while they're working in the fields, and there is a picturesque beauty of hills at the backdrop. It's a very romanticized image, as if life in villages is very peaceful and life in villages is very beautiful. Shyam Benegal explores villages as spaces of exploitation. as spaces of suppression. And he makes us understand that what is responsible for their suppression. And that critical understanding of the social structure that Shyam Benegal offers through his films makes him a profound filmmaker. Stories, they are told in typical realist manner. But in that realism, there are layers. It's not so simple. So you have to place those films in the larger historical context. And then you understand that why just a boy is picking up a stone and throwing out the window becomes an important shot, not only cinematically, but as well as historically, right? So then he continues. Nishant deals with, again, as I told, sexual violence on women. Ankur deals with, again, oppression of low caste, and the character of Lakshmi, played by Shivana Azmi, is an important character in the film. He continues with his, we can say, focus on women-centered narratives, but the focus shifts from villages to cities. And we have film like Bhumika. Bhumika is a film which is based on autobiography of a famous theatre personality, Hansa Vatkar. In this film, Shyam Benegal is now experimenting with his narrative strategies. This film deals with the struggle of a woman who is trying to carve an identity for herself in a male-dominated world. In her journey, she comes across various men. Most of them are exploitative, oppressive, barring one example. But during her struggle, she resists and decides to stay alone at the end of the film. This journey of a woman is very important. But if we pay attention to the mode of storytelling, he is moving away from the mode of storytelling he had adopted in his first three films. This is one film in which he breaks the linear chronology. There are flashbacks, and the memory of Usha, the female protagonist, her childhood memories, they intersperse the narrative of the film. And his use of sepia monochromatic footages in order to show the past images and then coming back in the present. Bhumika is one film which is not merely set in cities, but which also shows that how Shyam Benegal is now experimenting with his modes of storytelling. If I talk about his experiments with modes of storytelling, then three films again come to my mind. One is Arohan, made in 1980s. Then films like Sardari Begum and Zubaida. Arohan is a film which deals with, again, a real life incident of Indraprastha and his struggle, which was published in the Frontline, if I'm not wrong. Shyam Benegal was approached by the government of West Bengal to make a film on the story of Indraprastha in order to make people aware. Somewhere, yes, the government of West Bengal was, in a way, we can say, was using Shyam Benegal or his cinema as a medium to propagate their ideology. It was. But at the same time, Shyam Benegal's attempt is to give us a narrative of the oppressed. The film deals with the failure of land reforms in India. There is a question of Bargadari, sharecroppers. In different regions of India, you will find that the sharecroppers have their own problems. And this film is focused in Bengal. But when the film begins, different actors, they come, they appear, and they announce it on screen that my name is Om Puri, and I'm going to play Harinam Mandal's character in this film. Other actor comes, he speaks, my name is so-and-so, and I'm going to play this role in the film. Now, when film, it creates an effect of what we call aesthetic distancing. it tells us that what we are watching is a film, and it breaks the semblance of realism. Though film is rooted in reality, it's based on a real incident. And the way he has narrated the story, the way he has told the story, Shyam Benegal is very close to the social and political reality. He is not trying to romanticize the struggle of Hariram Mandir. But even while being close to social reality, he is breaking the semblance of realism. And he is creating an effect of aesthetic distancing, alienation, aesthetic alienation. And that reminds of Bertolt Brecht's, his theatrical techniques, which he also used in his theater. Sardari Begum and Zubaida, these two films, if you have seen any of these two films, you will find that these films have multiple character narrators. There is one person, Sardari Begum, who dies in the beginning of the film. And there is a journalist who starts working on her story. And when she is working on her story, she meets various people. And every character in this film, in the narrative, is telling us about different aspects of Sardari Begum. The question is then, who is Sardari Begum? Is she merely a light classical Thumri singer? Is she a bad mother? Is she a mistress to someone? Or is she a bad sister? Who is she? Put Sardari Begum in one category. The similar narrative structure has been followed in Zubaida. When the film dies, when the film begins, Zubaida dies. And her son is now working on his mother's life. And while working on his mother's life, he is exploring that who his mother was. And again, he meets different people who were associated with Zubaida's. And they again tell different aspects of Zubaida. Zubaida as a daughter, Zubaida as a friend, Zubaida as a second wife, Zubaida as a dancer. So now philosophically, it means that when we try to understand any phenomenon, any reality, in a unified manner, we pay attention only to one aspect of it. Films like Zubaida and Sardari Begum, they somewhere destabilize that notion that truth is unified, truth is linear. But there are multiple perspectives and there are multiple facets. And all those multiple facets of one personality, they are explored through multiple points of view used in the film. But it's difficult to define what kind of woman Sardari Begum was. That's not merely a matter of narrative structure used by Shyam Benegal. And that is where lies the complexity in Shyam Benegal's films. Besides telling us stories in an interesting way, how he weaves in cultural and historical issues in his narrative, that's important. Now, Sardari Begum is a character who belongs to a simple middle-class family. She runs away from her house in order to learn music when she is a young girl, which means her father and brother, they associate stigma with the whole profession of singing and dancing, especially women singing and dancing in public. It has its own history. Fine. And when India was about to get independence, Indian state also adopted a policy, a moral policy, that who will be given sanction by the state, those who will perform on All India Radio. Now, there is a continuation of Victorian policies, how the British used to look at courtesans and these singers in India. So their status became problematic in the latter half of the 19th century and in the first of the 20th century. Somewhere we can find the continuation of the same Victorian morality in Indian state as well. Because Indian state came up with this policy that women who have this name Bai associated with them, they will have to purify themselves. And the process of purification was through marriage. कि आप शादी करें, देवी बने. And there were many such singers who belonged to the families of musicians, singers, and dancers, and their names were indicating their identity. They got themselves, in a way, we can say, sanitized by marrying someone and having the suffix of Devi with them. Only then All India Radio was giving them sanction to perform. Try to understand. There was a time when there used to be Kotha cultures. Fine. From Kotha cultures, that is where courtesans used to have certain privileges despite their paradoxical status in the society. But gradually, because of the British policies, their status became, we can say, problematic, and they started losing their livelihood. And from Kothas, Sardari Begum's career, if we pay attention, it begins when she gave a private mudra performance in the house of a zamindar. From there, she is performing on the radio, and that is a new media which is emerging in independent India. From there, she is also performing on stage, the way we have musical concerts these days. So Sardari Begum's life, in a way, traces that history, that how these women who were performing earlier in Kothas, then they began performing on the radio, and Doordarshan also played its role. And then there are public performances in the stage, in the form of stage concerts. And these days, and another extension is that how we have so many TV reality shows in which people from different backgrounds, they come and they are pursuing their career in singing and dancing. So the stigma which was once associated with it, that made Sardari Begum's journey problematic. Film set in Delhi. The beginning of the film, Sardari Begum dies because of some riots and the stone is thrown at her head. These are certain historical signifiers made in 1990s, talking about riots, talking about targeting a Muslim light classical Thumri singer. It brings in so many other layers of culture, layers of Indian history, and also the layers of India's changing social and political sphere, which makes Sardari Begum a complex film. Another film which was made before Sardari Begum was Momo. Now, sir, he made Momo after the infamous Bombay riots. Momo can be seen as a partition film. Again, this film does not directly deal with the we can say, with the migration of people or the communal violence taking place during the partition. But it does tell us how partition complicated human life. Momo is a woman who was born at Panipat. After marriage, she shifted to Lahore, and then independence happened. Who was a woman who was supposed to believe in, who was bureaucratically born in India, became a Pakistani national after marriage. And now, because of certain changes in her in-laws, she wishes to come back to India and wants to stay with her sister in Bombay. Now, Indian bureaucracy considers her as an outsider because she has Pakistani passport and she is Pakistani national. So Momo believes that India is her home, but bureaucracy defines that she is an outsider. So this conflict between persons belonging to the land and her status being complicated by certain historical changes and two nation states coming into being and their respective bureaucracies, they complicate the whole situation. Momo is seen as an outsider, not only by the bureaucracy, but also in the household. And that is where Shyam Benegal has used camera work very, very creatively and intelligently in the film. There is a young boy in the film who looks at this Momo as an outsider because he lives with his grandmother and he is not willing to accept anyone else intruding into their personal space. So there is a fish tank in the living room. So camera has been used in a fashion that sometimes fish tank becomes the border between Momo and the young child. So how this demarcation has been used by Shyam Benegal, picking one object which is part of the space where action is taking place and suggesting a kind of boundary that this is one boundary she is not supposed to cross because she is not welcome in the other part of the house. But gradually she is able to strike a friendly note with the child, and we can say that that boundary is erased. So what comes to my mind is the way Shyam Benegal uses camera. He uses certain tropes which are in the natural environment, and within that he uses those tropes and make them a part of his vocabulary. And ordinary objects which are otherwise part of the decor, otherwise part of the household, they become metaphors. And this is where, again, I'm reminded of Bertolt Brecht. Brecht used to say that if you have something on stage, it's part of the decor, then nothing should be there just for the heck of it. Everything should play its role in conveying the larger meaning. Somewhere the mise-en-scène of Shyam Benegal also does the same. The way he imagines his mise-en-scène. He does not create symbols and metaphors artificially and impose them on the narrative. He picks his narratives from the natural environment in which action is taking place, but uses his camera in such a manner that natural space acquires certain metaphorical signification. So things which have typical denotative value, they acquire connotative value. And that is where we can say his ingenuity, his greatness lies. And similar use he has done in Sardari Begum as well. There is one scene in which the female journalist is talking to her father, who happens to be Sardari Begum's brother. And she is asking him that you never told me that Sardari Begum is my aunt, she is my bua. And there is a dialogue between father and daughter. Father is expressing his worldview, and the young female journalist is expressing her worldview. And both the characters, they have been divided by using a shaft in the middle. So one screen is divided into two multiple, we can say, frame within frame composition, giving individual space to each character, suggesting their different ideological viewpoints and how they are speaking from their respective positions. So this is one thing which I feel that makes Shyam Benegal a very sensitive filmmaker. His style of filmmaking is that you will never feel that camera work is being imposed on the viewers, on the audience. It seems to be slightly understated, but while being understated, he is making very creative and suggestive cinematic phrases, cinematic compositions. He's throwing certain coded messages, which he wants the audience to decode. And this coded message is given not only in the form of visuals, sometimes he has used even sound as a part of his codes. For example, in film like Manthan, the film is set in emergency period. The first scene, opening scene of the film is that the train enters a railway platform, a railway station, and the protagonist, played by Girish Karnad, he gets down and he is looking that there is no one to receive him. Then 2 or 3 villages come and they tell, sorry saab, aaj gaadi time par aa gayi. Indicating that how during the emergency period, trains used to run on time without making it a word. Second aspect which he has used is radio messages, which are constantly, which can be heard on the soundtrack. There is some dialogue going on between 2 characters, but the radio message which were generally broadcast during the emergency time, they can be heard on the soundtrack of the film. So he's suggesting if this soundtrack, if this radio message is there, it means this is a historical time period in which the film is set. Similarly, in film like Bhumika, he has used famous songs in order to suggest which could be the decade. Because film deals with the story of Hansa Vadkar, as I told you earlier. His time period is not the contemporary when the film was made. The film is set in the past. So how to create the time period of 1940s or late 30s? So one is the costume, fine. One, the decor of the house. Third is these signifiers as well, by using popular songs of 1940s, by using popular songs of 1950s. So he's using sound as also part of his cinematic image in order to suggest this is the time period. So it means that Shyam Benegal as a filmmaker is using not merely the visuals for storytelling, he's using the audio as well. The sound is also a part of his film communication. He's not merely using the linear chronology as he has used in earlier films in which realism dominates. He has also experimented with modes of storytelling. He has created the effect of aesthetic distancing in film like Arohan, and he has also created multiple narrators and multiple points of view in films like Sardari Begum and Zubaida, and in Kondura, which is based on a Marathi novel, which again deals with the conflict between tradition and modernity, especially certain superstitions which we Indian people or we believe in, which are rooted in our cultural and religious beliefs, and how they are in conflict with our modern outlook. In that, the way he has used nature, the way he has shown human beings part of nature, somewhere Shyam Benegal is moving towards what we can say naturalism in cinema. Another important aspect, if there is realism, if there is naturalism, if there is aesthetic distancing, if there is multiple narrators and points of view in one film, then there is one film made by him which is based on a real incident, which again deals with caste-based oppression, and in which he is using film within film technique. Self-reflexivity is also there. And that film is Summer. The film is based on an incident which is reported in a book by Harshvande, that how a person was killed because low caste person tried to enter the temples of the upper caste. The film was made in the late 1990s, towards the end of the century. And it's important that in the 1974, caste-based oppression is an issue, and by 1998, 1999, caste-based violence and oppression is still an issue that continues to bother Indian society. And that issue is still relevant. We cannot say that we have resolved certain issues which bother Indian society. So when he is making this film, what's happening that there is a crew of filmmaker and actors who are in a village where actually that incident happened, and they are shooting a film. They are making a film on the same incident, this killing a man because he tried to enter the temple of the upper caste. So on the one hand, there is so-called real narrative, which the film is being shot, that is happening. On the other hand, there is a film, a fictional treatment to the real incident. So two narratives are moving simultaneously, and these two narratives are linked to each other because the film, as the film within film progresses, the actual film is also progressing. So two narratives, two narrative strands, and two narrative frames within one frame, they are moving simultaneously to each other. Now, all these narrative techniques and the structures that he is adopting make him, we can say, an artist who is exploring the potential of his media. And these experimentations he's doing, most of these experimentations he's doing in the 1990s, but for Arohan, which was made in 1986 or 1987, that's the time period when Arohan was made. And 1990s is also the time when India adopted the policy of liberalization. That can also be seen as a period of the decline of the new wave movement, because after late 1980s and early 1990s, the momentum which was there in the 60s and 70s and early 80s, that momentum wasn't there. Indian cultural sphere was changing. Indian political sphere was also changing. Momo, Sardari Begum, and Zubaida, they are hinting at how the question of one religious identity and then women on the other hand, it becomes problematic in the changing political sphere of India. But while cultural background is changing, in that cultural backdrop, Shyam Benegal is also experimenting with his modes of storytelling. And he is moving away from the political cinema he made in the beginning of his career, without compromising on the concern. That is one important aspect of it. Zubaida, we know, is one film in which he has used the mainstream star cast. In most of his films, you will find music is given by Vadraj Bhatia. In Zubaida, music is given by A.R. Rahman. Zubaida is the only film in which Krishna Kapoor is there. Otherwise, Smita Patil, Shabana Azmi, Anant Nag, Amrish Puri, and these were the names actors who were regularly appearing in his films. And this is Zubaida is one film in which we can find that the mainstream cast and crew has been used. But the issue that he has touched upon is still very important. Starting from Momo, coming to Sardari Begum, and that is a time period he also made the making of the Mahatma, and then Momo, and then, Zubaida. He is certainly moving away from the aesthetics of we can say, which we find in films like Ankur, Nishant, and Manthan. But that does not make him a commercial filmmaker. He is exploring the potential of his cinema, of his storytelling, without compromising on his commitment to the basic issues. He continues to make films from the point of view of the minorities. He continues to make film from the point of view of those who are on the margins of Indian society. And that is somewhere found, I think, when he has made a film on Mahatma Gandhi as well. Most of the time when we talk about Mahatma Gandhi is remembered for his contribution to the Indian national movement. Things which he did in India while he was fighting against the British rule. The making of the Mahatma, on the other hand, deals with a lesser explored aspect of Mahatma Gandhi's life. And that film deals with that journey when Mahatma Gandhi discovered himself and he became Mahatma. He discovered his satyagraha, the mode of protest. He discovered the importance of non-violence. All this self-discovery of Mahatma is taking place while he was in Africa. Another thing about this film is that the way he has portrayed Kasturba. If we pay attention to his overall work, starting from Ankur, Nishant, Bhumika, fine. And then we have films like maybe Momo, Sardari Begum. There is a focus on women characters. And his women, even if they are suffering, because some feminist critics, they have criticized that in some of his films, women are weak, especially in Nishant, I agree that film woman is weak, but he is giving a critique of male-dominated Indian society. So his focus on this, on women, one section of Indian society who are on the margins because of the patriarchal social structure. Look at the way he has portrayed Kasturba in the film. Compare this Kasturba with Attenborough's Kasturba in that film. Kasturba in Mahatma Gandhi, Kasturba in Shyam Benegal's film is much vocal. She is quite assertive. And on various occasions, she confronts Mahatma Gandhi. And she's not a silent, submissive follower of Mahatma Gandhi, the kind of Kasturba we find in Richard Attenborough's film. So this is where somewhere Shyam Benegal continues to give a different perspective. And that is where we can say his alternative perspective lies. Villages are not romanticized. Cities are not merely spaces of new opportunities, or the cities are not merely spaces of crime. Every space has its own complex dynamics. If villages are the spaces of oppression, villages are where exploitation takes place, if villages are where feudal values are they are at work and they marginalize low caste men and women, peasants, then these very villages are also becoming the spaces where social change is imagined. And he talks about changing the society. Cities, on the other hand, they are again not monolithic. It's not that you go to city chasing your dream, or you go to city, then it's a city, it's a space of corruption, crime. If cities are supposed to be the spaces of modernity, people living with new ideas, then he explores the inherent paradoxes of cities as well. That how cities also have their own paradoxes. How masculinity in cities or urban masculinity can also oppress women in their own way. So in his representation or in his understanding of Indian society, it's not very, very simplistic. He explores the hidden layers of society, culture, and history, and all those strands, we can say, work together in his films. Films he has always been making on certain issues, and he continues with that commitment in his latest films like Welcome to Sajjanpur and Well Done Abba. Films are comedies. Films are satires. Again, criticizing the failures of certain policies of the government. In Welcome to Sajjanpur, there is only one literate man. There are people who still believe in superstitions. There is a woman who wants her daughter to get married to some animal or some tree, so that there is whatever flaw is there in the astrological chart should be warded away. And along with that, there is also a hint towards a new thing happening in Indian society, that how one Hijra community is also contesting elections and they are playing a part in Indian democracy, which has happened, you know that. Well Done Abba, again, how people can bend Indian bureaucracy, rules, paperwork, and corruption in Indian system. But the mode of storytelling is comedy. failings of Indian system, right from his first films to the last film, are constantly addressed to. Always looking at India, not from the position of the center, but always from the position of the margins. So he is giving us a point of view, ideologically point of view of the margins. In this career, how he has experimented. There is realism in his early films. There is naturalism in his early films. Then there is aesthetic distancing. There is film within film. There is multiple narrators in his films. Then there is use of comedy. While doing that, he has also adapted literary works, fictional, non-fictional. Bhumika is based on autobiography. The Making of Mahatma is based on biography written by Fatima Mir. Janoon, a very important film made by him, is based on a novella by Ruskin Pond, Flight of Pigeons. Kalyug, again set in Bombay, dealing with business world and the nexus between business world and the underworld, is said to be a modern secular retelling of the Mahabharata that is based on, in a way, based on epic. Films like Momo, Sardari Begum, Zubaida, they are based on biographical material. Subhash Chandra Bose, again, one historical person who these days has become very important, but earlier he was there, but not talked too much about. So Shyam Benegal is a filmmaker who has given stories in such a way that people responded to his cinema. He never made blockbusters. He was not interested in that. But his films always reached the audience. His cinema was art cinema, but art cinema which has a larger audience as compared to the other. In most of his films, you will find that he is regaining the amount he is investing. He's not looking film cinema as a commercial enterprise. It's basically for his artistic value. He looks at cinema as an artwork. And that is what maybe he shared with me when I had the opportunity of interviewing him while working on my book. He said that I don't believe in this category of mainstream cinema and art cinema or parallel cinema. Cinema is cinema. The only thing is that the filmmaker should know what's the language of cinema. And the filmmaker should be able to use that understanding while making a film. And how he derives his understanding of the language of cinema, yes, he has been inspired by Satyajit Ray. He looks up to filmmakers like De Sica. He is under the influence of French New Wave. So those schools of filmmaking have given him an understanding what's the language of cinema that he uses. His style of filmmaking is not flamboyant, but at the same time, very subtle, very nuanced. Films flow smoothly, but narratives are very complex because he is not telling us simply a love story. He's not merely telling us a thriller story. His stories are rooted in Indian society. And when his stories are rooted in Indian society, he brings in culture, he brings in history, he brings in the current politics, and all those aspects, they move, they are woven into each other and they build a narrative. And the beauty of an artist is, which I find in some of the great novelists as well, that they give you a narrative. At surface level, you will find it's a story about 2 or 3 characters. But in the hidden layers of every narrative, you will find the entire history and culture of that land has been woven into, without making you conscious of it formalistically or artificially. And that is where the ideology of any artist lies. It should not never float on the surface like scum. Ideology is something which moves in the undercurrent. So if Shyam Benegal is making comedies and satire in his later part of career, that does not mean that he has compromised on his ideological commitments. He is not making political cinema in the 21st century because that sociological context is not there. The 1970s was the time period when political cinema was made. Somewhere art, aesthetics, they are rooted to, linked to the sociological habitus, the ground in which they are rooted. And as an intelligent artist, he's responding to the changing reality. And constantly he has been reinventing himself as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. And he is able to reach out, even the audience of the post-liberalization India, which still makes him an important filmmaker. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, if you want to.
Yeah, there are certain questions in the chat box.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Can you find those questions? Should I read out those
No,
questions?
yes, what to
Yeah.
keep in mind while making a biopic or a historical movie so that it don't or doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah, this
Khushi Sharma.
Khushi Sharma, yeah.
Khushi, that's an important question when we make a historical film, because there is one entire field of film studies and in historical studies. Because in Western universities, they are using films as an alternative source to do history. The way in India, some people are using oral narratives, some people use literary narratives to do history. And with films, this allegation has always been made that they take liberties with historical facts. It differs from filmmaker to filmmaker. Now, some filmmakers or some writers, they use history as a backdrop, and in the backdrop of history, they give us an engaging narrative. But if someone is writing a historical narrative, either a novel or making a historical film, if I focus on films, yes, the person is not supposed to take liberties with the historical facts. But more than that, what becomes important is that what kind of historical thinking is going on. Fine. That try to understand what we call history is also a narrative. And that narrative gives us an understanding of history from a particular point of view. And then comes in another narrative. Fine. That narrative will give us a different understanding of the same historical episode, same historical period from a different point of view. And that is where, when I said that it's important to deal with film made on Mahatma Gandhi by Shyam, Benegal, then what kind of Mahatma Gandhi is he talking about? He's not taking liberties with historical facts, but more important is that how do we understand Mahatma Gandhi in our popular imagination based on his contribution in the national struggle? Fine. And maybe and other austerity measures that he followed. But what about an ordinary person becoming a Mahatma? Someone who was struggling to establish himself as a lawyer. Fine. And from there, he is invited by two brothers in Africa, and then he discovers himself. And what makes him so special? That he was able to implement all those strategies which he found or discovered in Africa. He implemented the same in India later on. So Mahatma Gandhi, that we know as an important leader of Indian national movement, he became that leader while staying in Africa. So while we are dealing with historical films, it is more important to understand that what understanding of history the filmmaker is trying to give to us. Fine. Whether the history is written from male point of view or from female point of view, whether the history is written from the ruler's point of view or from the subaltern point of view. So that historical thinking is more important that we must pay attention to.
Vivekji, there's one very interesting question which has been asked by Isika Shaw, that she says that this discrimination of caste and sexual violence on women and all these things still persist in our society despite these kind of films are being made. So whether do you think that by making this kind of movies, the change can be there in the world?
Good question, Isika, because this is one question which we often deal with. the function of art. Fine. And many people criticize that when these films are made, films on the low caste people, are they watching it? Who are these films meant for? Films may be giving us stories of the poor, low caste peasants, farmers, working class people, but are they watching these films? See, try to understand what function do we ascribe to art in general. If I say that you write a revolutionary poem, you write a poem on Indian on freedom, or you make a film that deals with the idea of social change and society will change, it's not going to happen like that. But art plays a very important role in raising certain debates in the society, in changing the people's consciousness, the way we think about certain issues. Recently, you have films that deals with the question of homosexuality in India. So you cannot say that the whole issue has been resolved because there are a couple of films on homosexuality. But it's important that when these films are made, at least these issues are discussed. When these issues are discussed, somewhere people's attitude towards certain notions, certain ideas, maybe the way people look at low caste people, the way people look at people with alternative sexualities, fine. When they start thinking about it, when they start debating about it, it changes people's consciousness. That is one contribution which art can make. That is the relation which I find in films and these issues. Fine.
So, Shruti, there are so many questions. So, can you sum up that? I mean, you can name the students who are asking questions so that they are acknowledged. And any one question summarizing what all they want to ask, you can ask that. And then we need to wind up the session.
So there are many questions students have asked. Shashank, then Aditya Gosen, Shambhavi Shri. They're all asking you that Shyam Benegal's role as he was a filmmaker, screenwriter, director. So what is your opinion? Like, what is the highlight point of him and his contribution towards parallel cinema? If you could
and also,
which you have already.
Yeah, also this has been asked by that why you choose to write on Shyam Benegal. I mean, what exactly was your inspiration to do this?
There are a couple of questions. And now, okay, let me begin with why Shyam Benegal. There are a couple of films that have always fascinated me. And that's very interesting. You know, Doordarshan at one point of time was used to play a very important role. Many of Shyam Benegal's early films we watched on Doordarshan, on TV. And at that time, I will be very honest with you, I didn't know who Shyam Benegal was. And I didn't remember the name of the filmmaker as well. Shyam Benegal's, when I was doing my PhD, that was a time when Sardari Begum came. I watched Sardari Begum. And that fascinated me. Then I started exploring other films by Shyam Benegal. And then I discovered that some of those films, maybe like Manthan, or maybe some shots from Bhumika, some shots from other films, they had stayed in my memory. They were part of my childhood memory because when I had watched those films on TV, so they had stayed with me. What stayed with me was not merely one or two shots, or maybe the kind of different modes of storytelling that we generally associate with the mainstream cinema. And it's kind of flamboyance which we generally find in other filmmakers. In Shyam Benegal films, I always found that his films are very close to reality. And if we want to understand film as an art, the question is, what makes an art art? There are a number of kinds of books available in the market. Every book is not what we call literature. There are popular books, there are non-fictional books, but on what basis do we decide that this is a good literary work? What is the literariness of any work of literature? someone who knows how to write, the craft of story writing, and someone who deals with certain social issues. We expect that. Shyam Benegal meets all those standards. His storytelling is very simple, but his stories always takes you closer to the issues of Indian society. If you want to understand that cinema is not only for entertainment, then Shyam Benegal is one of those filmmakers. He is not the only one. He's one of those filmmakers, those who have made films with a social purpose, with a social function. That is one reason which I like Shyam Benegal. Then, as a filmmaker, as I talked about in my talk, that he has been experimenting with modes of storytelling. He's not fixed. This is my style, and this is how I will make my films. He has been constantly evolving as an artist, which makes him an important filmmaker, and at the same time, I'd say one who is reinventing himself, constantly changing, constantly evolving. Fine. Then there are other questions. Which side of Shyam Benegal is highlighted? Him as a filmmaker, as a screenwriter, as a director. Yes, Shyam Benegal has been actively associated as a writer in many of his films, but he is primarily a director. He is an auteur. In earlier films, he was showing caste and gender-based oppression. When we talk about films like Ankur and Nishan. By the time we have films like Welcome to Sajjanpur or Well Done Abba, he's not showing oppression, but corruption in the system. But within that, women are not passive; they are active participants, which makes we can say his women different. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, I think you have answered. I think Khushi asked this question. Then we also have some similar questions. Shruti Sankriya also asked about female representation, which I think, sir, you have already answered. Mm-hmm. And I think that's about it. We can move towards the end. All the questions have been answered, and I'm very happy to see students have also been very attentive to the lecture which you have given. Now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Sushmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Festival Chief Associate Director CIFFI, to give her concluding remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Professor Vivek Sajdev, for such a wonderful talk. We all knew Shyam Benegal already, but Vivek ji helped us in looking at Benegal and his work from a slightly different perspective. As told by Dr. Vivek, Shyam Benegal was superb in telling a story through camera. Also, he was a master in giving an expression to resistance without showing violence on the screen. Shyam Benegal was always sensitive for people who are downtrodden, belong to lower caste, economically weak, suppressed, and exploited. He knew how to portray a woman character with all sensitivity. Shyam Benegal was a master craftsman with a profound understanding of technology and human sentiments. मैंने भी बहुत सारी फिल्म्स उनकी देखी हैं और ये बिल्कुल सच है कि वो क्लोजर टू इंडियन सोसाइटी, जैसा कि आपने कहा, और रियलिटी को पोर्ट्रे करने वाले इंसान, जैसे वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर हुआ या वेल डन अब्बा, ये आपके भूमिका, मंथन, बहुत सारी फिल्में और बहुत खूबसूरत फिल्में जिनको आप हमेशा शायद मेमोरी में अपनी रख सकते हैं. कभी भी आप इस तरह की बात होती है तो आपको वो पुरानी फिल्में अचानक याद आ जाती हैं. So thank you, Dr. Vivek Sajdev, for telling us so many things about Shyam Benegal. We feel obliged to you for this. Thank you all the participants in this session. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Please speak. So now
Thank
towards
you,
the
ma'am.
end, I also extend my regards to Dr. Sachdeva for this insightful session. I extend my immense gratitude to the management of DME. Without the support of Mr. Aman Sahani, Vice Chairman DME, Honorable Justice Bhavar Singh, Director General DME, and Dr. Ravikant Swamy, Director DME, this festival would not have been come this far. I also thank them for giving us this wonderful opportunity and the resources to execute the same. I am thankful to Dr. Amrish Saxena, Dean DME Media School Festival Director CIFFI, and Dr. Vikrant Kishore, Festival Director, and Dr. Susmita Bala, Head DME Media School and Festival Associate Director for their constant guidance and encouragement at every step. I thank our partners, the student body of DME Media School SPARK, that is students with positive attitude and resonating communication. I also want to thank our jury member, Mr. Nimish Kapoor, Mr. Murtaza Ali, Ms. Supriya Suri, Mr. Pankaj Rakesh for patiently and fairly watching all the movies and for giving their precious time and feedback. A special note of thanks to Ms. Manmeet Kaur, Ms. Shruti VS, Ms. Mudita Raj, Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, Dr. T. Nambora for their efforts, for their constant support and cooperation. Dr. Krishna Pandey, Mr. Pramod Pandey, and Mr. Kamil for media coverage. And I also want to thank Mr. Sachin Nair, Mr. Sumantra Sati Das, Mr. Yogesh Sharma, Mr. Vishal Sai for digital and production support, Mr. Anmol Mehta for designing, and Mr. Abhishek Yadav for IT support. We are also thankful to them. I also like to thank to the student team of CIFFI who worked tirelessly facing all the challenges and obstacles of the pandemic to make this festival happen. I must thank all the participants who submitted their creative piece. Thank you all attendees to join this session. I also request everyone present in this session to please fill the feedback form. The link is in the chat box. The next session of the day, which is panel discussion, is at 12 p.m. on the topic Creating and Performing Bollywood Music and Dance in Australia. So we look forward to see you in this session. Thank you so much.